Welcome, seeker of forgotten names. You stand now at a threshold, not of your own choosing, but of mine. This is not a story you will hear. This is a summoning, a calling back of something the light itself tried to bury. For centuries, she waited in the margins of memory, in the spaces between words, in the pause before midnight when the world forgets itself. They gave her 1,000 names not to honor her, but to dilute her power, to scatter her essence so thoroughly that no one could speak her whole. But fragmented or not, she was always there, waiting, listening, always at the crossroads, even when the roads grew old and crumbled to dust. Tonight, we do what the ancients feared most. We remember her, not as one goddess, but as the infinite she became. This is the threshold you have chosen to cross. There is no turning back now. This is the goddess who had 1,000 names. Why do we fear the threshold? Why does the crossroads make our breath catch? Why, even now, in our age of electric light and certainty, do we hesitate at the place where paths diverge? You could stop listening now. You could close this door and return to the comfortable dark of unknowing. But you won't, because you've already felt it, that pull toward the forbidden, that hunger for what was deliberately silenced. There is a goddess whose very existence became a question too dangerous to ask aloud, not because she was evil, but because she was true. And truth, seeker, is always more terrifying than lies. They erased her from the daylit hymns. They forbade her name from the temples of noon. Yet she never left. Every shadow you've ever felt watching you, every moment you've stood at a crossroads and felt something ancient acknowledge your presence, that was her. Tonight, she will speak. In the nether twilight of ancient Greece, there existed a name spoken only in whispers, carved into charms meant to be buried, invoked in the dark by those desperate enough to call. The Olympians, for all their light and certainty, held one figure in a reverence so profound it bordered on terror. Not Hades, lord of the dead, who ruled openly, not Artemis, who walked in moonlight with her pride of hunters, but something older, something that predated the golden age of Zeus. This was Hecate, or rather, this was one of her names, the first among 1,000, the original wound from which all others bled. She was not invented by human fear, she was discovered by it, born of the Titans themselves, carrying in her blood the memory of a world before Olympus, before the hierarchy of heaven was carved in stone. The histories tell us she alone retained her power after the Titanic wars, that Zeus himself granted her dominion over sky, earth, and sea. But they whisper something else in the ruins. They whisper that he feared her too much to truly rule her, that her power was never given, only acknowledged. Few remember her now, fewer dare speak her name. But here, in the dark, between the breath and the word, we will. Imagine the roads of ancient Hellas at the hour before dawn. The air is thick with moisture and memory. Marble stones, worn smooth by 10,000 feet, glisten beneath a moon that seems to pull away from the earth. Somewhere, a torch burns, not of wood or oil, but of something older, something that doesn't smoke. The statues in the sacred groves turn their blank eyes inward, as if they cannot bear to watch what walks between dusk and night. The wind carries the scent of laurel and burnt honey. This is not the Greece of daylight, the marble temples gleaming in Mediterranean sun, the philosophers arguing in the agora. This is the other Greece, the one that only exists when the living world sleeps, the one that remembers what the light has forgotten. In every crossroads, in every place where three paths converge, there is a coldness that no sun can quite warm, a presence that makes animals bow their heads and move quickly past. Even the statues have turned their eyes away. It began, as such things do, with a need, a desperate prayer uttered in darkness, a ritual enacted at the crossing of roads. They sealed mirrors to prevent her seeing into the daylit world. They bound her names in chains of forgetfulness, burying each epithet beneath layers of deliberate silence. The priests carved warnings on stone that itself grew old enough to crumble. Do not speak her name at noon. Do not call her beneath the stars. She comes only to those who truly need her, and those who call her never truly want what she brings. But something in that sealing did not hold. Something in the binding came loose. Because what is imprisoned in silence becomes only larger in shadow. What is forbidden becomes only more powerful in the forbidden. They sealed mirrors, and still, she came. In the reflection of water that no one should trust. In the glass that shows you not what you are, but what you might become. The curse was not that they named her. It was that they named her and then tried to bury the name alive. To speak of her is to risk invoking her. This is what the ancients knew. This is what made her unique among all the gods. Hecate was not worshipped in the light. There were no processions celebrating her glory, no choruses singing her deeds in the theater. She existed in the spaces between naming, in the pause after you call a name and before you hear a response. The Triaditis, she of the triple road, haunted the junctions where paths converged in darkness. Enodia, the goddess of highways and thresholds, stood eternal at every gate where a traveler paused, wondering whether to continue or turn back. In her chthonic aspect, as Thonia, she descended below even the dominion of Hades, whispering secrets in caverns where no living thing dared venture. Phosphoros, the bringer of light, and yet her light was not illumination, but revelation. It showed you not what was, but what was hidden, what trembled in shadow. The very act of speaking these names made them incomplete, fractal, multiplying like light through a broken mirror. To say her name was to invite her shadow. To speak her shadow was to invite something darker still. Why did even the gods fear her reflection? Because reflection is truth, and truth cannot be controlled. In the beginning, before the moment of transgression, there was only order. The Olympians ruled their domains with certainty. The sky knew its place. The sea acknowledged its boundaries. The underworld remained sealed to the living. But then came the hunger. Call it desire, call it curiosity, call it the moment when knowledge itself became a poison that tasted of sweetness. Someone looked where they should not have looked. Someone reached for a truth that was never meant to be held. Perhaps it was Hecate herself, inheritor of titanic memory, who remembered a world before this one, who carried in her essence the knowledge that even divine order is temporary, contingent, breakable. Perhaps she whispered this knowing to a mortal who listened too closely, or perhaps she merely witnessed the transgression and chose not to prevent it, which, for a goddess of her power, amounts to the same thing. Curiosity is just hunger wearing a crown, and hunger, once awakened, cannot be sated by mere naming. It demands the thing itself. That first sin was not an action, but a recognition. The recognition that the boundaries the gods had set were not eternal. They were just old, and old things crumble. There was one who survived, who saw what others were never meant to see. The fragments of his testimony survive in broken tablets, in the margins of texts that scholars dismiss as unreliable. He spoke like someone who was remembering and forgetting simultaneously, as if every word he uttered was being erased even as he spoke it. His name is lost. Perhaps he never had one that could be written, but his voice remains in the echoes of those who heard him speak. He told of a night when Hecate walked not alone, but as a procession, one body, yet infinite. He described the torch she carried as emitting not light, but silence, an absence so profound that sound itself seemed to recoil from it. He spoke of her eyes, all three of them, or perhaps one I multiplied, looking simultaneously into the past that was already dead, the present that was still in the act of dying, and the future that had not yet learned it was coming. The authorities questioned him once and then never again, not because they killed him, though some whisper that he died, but because they realized that he had already ceased to be. He had become a voice, a memory, a gap in the world where a man once stood. What happens when a god is challenged? What occurs when the order of heaven is disturbed? The myths tell us of violent retribution, of Prometheus chained, of Semele burned by divine fire, of souls scattered across the fields of punishment. But the wrath of Hecate wore a different face. It was not explosive. It was not loud. It was the kind of punishment that unfolds across generations, so gradual that those who suffer it never quite know when the curse began. Springs that fed villages dried up, but slowly, so that no one could pinpoint the moment of divine displeasure. Children were born with the sight, the ability to perceive what should remain hidden, and this gift became their torment. Families whispered that certain bloodlines carried her mark, though they dared not say her name aloud. No one heard the screaming. Only the olives bled, their leaves turning black as if scorched from within, their fruit becoming bitter beyond any remedy. This was divine punishment stripped of its spectacle, punishment that asked no audience, wanted no witnesses. It simply was, a fact of the world, like gravity, like death, like the knowledge that all things end. And then came the turning point, the moment when victim became victor, when the hunted became something even more terrifying than the hunter. Hecate underwent a metamorphosis that no god before her had endured, or perhaps it was not a change at all, but a revelation of what she had always been. Her form became what the ancients called trimorph, 3 bodies, 3 heads, existing simultaneously in sky, earth, and underworld. But this was not punishment. It was apotheosis. A becoming so complete that she transcended the limitations of singular existence. She became the question that no god could answer. She was the key that unlocked every door. She was the torch that revealed and concealed in the same moment of burning. The hounds at her side, the red-eyed, black-furred creatures of legend, became an extension of her will, moving through the darkness with an intelligence that exceeded mere animal cunning. They could navigate paths that should not exist. They could find what begged never to be found. She had been imprisoned in silence, and silence had made her infinite. What mark does a god leave on the world when she is forbidden to leave it? The answer is written in the landscape itself. The springs fell silent. The roads grew dangerous in ways that mapmakers could not trace. Certain villages reported that their children were born with the sight, the ability to perceive the thin places where worlds overlapped, where reality grew permeable and uncertain. These children were usually gifted. Sometimes they were cursed. Often they were both. In the high places where three paths converged, travelers began to leave offerings: bread, wine, fire itself, carefully tended in small bronze vessels. They left these gifts not from love, but from something deeper, a recognition that some powers must be acknowledged, must be fed, must be kept satisfied in their silence. Otherwise, they might speak. And if she spoke, the world would have to listen. If she called out in full voice, using her true name and all of her 1,000 names simultaneously, the barriers between the living and the dead would crack like ancient plaster. The eternal echo remained, a vibration in the air that only certain people could perceive. Those who heard her name in the wind. Those who found themselves drawn to crossroads they did not choose to visit. They had already called her. The calling came from deeper than conscious choice. But the ancient world has not truly passed. It only pretends. The rituals have changed their names, but the pattern remains the same. People still stand at crossroads, still hesitate at thresholds, still leave offerings to forces they cannot name. In our modern age of certainty, of science and explanation, there remain moments when that certainty fractures. When we find ourselves drawn to a particular place at a particular time without knowing why. When we make a choice at a fork in the road and only later realize we could not have chosen differently. When we dream of a woman holding torches, standing at 3 different angles simultaneously, looking at us with eyes full of knowledge we were never meant to possess. Even now, some say she walks when the moon hides, that she guides those who wander alone at night toward homes they did not know they were seeking, that her hounds run through the streets of cities, invisible to most, but leaving traces for those who know how to read them. The offering bowls at crossroads have been replaced by smaller rituals, a pause before making a decision, a moment of recognition that some choices are not ours to make, that we are guided by forces older than choice. The 1,000 names have multiplied again in the modern age, each generation adding new epithets without understanding they are speaking the old tongue in new dialect. What is the cruelest punishment a god can receive? Not death, for gods do not die, not banishment, for they cannot truly leave their domains, but erasure, the systematic removal from memory, the deliberate forgetting. The Olympians understood this weapon well. They did not destroy Hecate. They could not. Her power was too vast, her roots too deep in the structure of reality itself. Instead, they fragmented her. They took her essence and scattered it across 1,000 names, each one incomplete, each one pointing away from the whole. They ensured that she would never be worshipped publicly, that her temples, what few existed, would be hidden in shadows and forgotten places. They made it forbidden to speak her name at noon, thus ensuring that her entire existence became associated with darkness and danger. Most brutally, they made her necessary while making her shameful. Every person who needed her had to call upon her in secret, had to perform rituals that they would deny, had to invoke her with the knowledge that such invocation marked them as different, dangerous, touched by something that respectable people did not acknowledge. History itself became complicit in her silence. The historians who might have recorded her openly turned away. The poets who might have sung her praises wrote her out of their own narratives. The philosophers who pondered her nature kept their thoughts locked in private journals, in letters that were never meant to be sent. Erasure is the cruelest form of remembrance. It is the creation of absence so profound that the absence itself becomes her greatest monument. But erasure was never complete. Something always survives. In a dig beneath Athens, in a place the excavators did not expect to find anything of value, there was discovered a fragment, not a statue, not a temple, but a small tablet of lead, rolled and sealed with red wax that had never been opened. When the seal was finally broken, this took years of debate among scholars. It contained a single line in ancient Greek, written in a hand that trembled with either fear or reverence. Do not wake what sleeps beneath the laurel. Do not call her by the old name. She is more powerful in forgetting than in remembrance. This single line has spawned 1,000 theories. Which old name? What laurel grove? What sleeps beneath? And what is the nature of sleep for something that cannot be killed? Some scholars believe the line is a warning. Others, a prayer. Still others argue that it is itself a trap, that to read it is already to have called her, already to have woken what should remain sleeping. The tablet exists in a vault now, in a museum that will not display it, guarded by people who did not choose to guard it but found themselves compelled to take the position. It sits in darkness, and they say the darkness around it is deeper than it should be, that it calls to certain visitors, drawing them again and again, though they cannot explain why they keep returning. If you are still here, listening, then you are one of us, the listeners in the dark, the ones who sense that the world is stranger, deeper, more meaningful than the daylight versions of reality permit. You have always known this. Perhaps you felt it as a child, in that moment before sleep when consciousness becomes uncertain and the boundaries of the self grow permeable. Perhaps you have felt it standing at crossroads, those literal moments of choice, or those metaphorical moments when your life divided into before and after. Perhaps you have recognized it in the faces of strangers, in the moment when another person's eyes meet yours and you both recognize something ineffable, something older than language. The invitation is this: you have already begun to remember her. The 1,000 names are already stirring in your consciousness, like something waking from a long sleep. To continue listening is to accept her presence. To subscribe, to follow these words into the darkness they lead toward, is to mark yourself. To say, I acknowledge what was deliberately forgotten. I honor what was meant to be erased. I will carry her names forward, even if I speak them only in the dark, only to myself, only in the moments before sleep when the world forgets to watch. Subscribe, because they are already trying to erase this, too. There exists a name, not one of the 1,000 that we have spoken or implied, but the original, the one that predates the Titanic Wars, that echoes backward through time to something that has no name in any human language. To speak it would be to risk the same transformation that befell those rare mortals who glimpsed her face. To write it would be to bind oneself to it, to become a conduit for its power, but it can be described. It sounds like the moment before thunder, like the space between one heartbeat and the next, like the sound the earth makes when something falls into a chasm and does not reach bottom. The meaning of the true name is something like she who walks the border, but that translation fails immediately, because walking implies motion through space, and her movement is not through space but through the barriers that keep spaces separate. She is the name that means simultaneously opening and closing, revealing and concealing, death and what comes after. The power is not in what is spoken. The power is in what trembles unspoken. In the moment when you almost say the name and catch yourself. In the recognition that some words, once truly spoken, cannot be unspoken. That some names, once used, bind the speaker forever to what is named. The unspeakable name is the most powerful of all because it exists in the space between intention and utterance. It lives in the pause. And in that pause, she is always listening. They say she never truly leaves, that she merely waits in the thresholds, in the doorways between one state of being and another. Sometimes her return is announced by dreams, visions of a woman holding torches, standing at intersections that should not exist in the geography of normal space. She calls to those who wander in their sleep, those who find themselves in landscapes they do not recognize, following paths that lead somewhere they did not intend to go. But the dream always ends the same way. The walker reaches the threshold and must choose, cross into the space where she stands, with all the knowledge and power and burden that crossing might bring, or turn back, wake, return to the life they know, carrying only the memory of her face, which they cannot quite describe to anyone who has not seen it themselves. Those who choose to cross never wake the same. Some return to their waking lives transformed, marked by an understanding they cannot articulate, moved by purposes they did not choose. Some do not return at all, though their bodies go on living in the world, inhabited now by something that remembers being mortal but no longer quite is. She speaks through mirrors. She walks in the peripheral vision of those who are nearly asleep. She appears in the moment between one song ending and another beginning, in that silence where the ear still echoes with the previous melody. Because some myths do not end, they only wait to be remembered, and remembrance is always a kind of returning. Perhaps the gods did not destroy her because they could not. Perhaps they feared her precisely because they could not control her. The histories written by the victors tell us that the Olympians defeated the Titans utterly, that they established an order that would last forever. But Hecate alone retained her power, her dominion, her throne. Zeus himself granted her unique authority. But in what currency was this grant paid? What did he offer her to accept her diminishment into silence? Or did she accept nothing? Did she simply remove herself, withdrawing from the daylit Olympian society by her own choice? Perhaps the erasure was not punishment at all, but a treaty, a negotiated boundary, an agreement between the Queen of Heaven and the Keeper of Thresholds. You remain unseen, unspoken, unworshipped in daylight. In exchange, you retain all your power. You remain the true sovereign of boundaries, of transitions, of the terrifying moments when one state transforms into another. The gods did not destroy her, they feared her, and their fear took the form of a bargain. Maybe her 1,000 names are not fragments of a shattered self, but a deliberate strategy, a way of existing in multiplicity so complete that no single attack could eliminate her. Maybe she chose to be forgotten. Maybe erasure was her own design, her own way of protecting the sacred power that only works in shadow. What is myth, if not the human attempt to understand ourselves? We invent gods to explain what we cannot explain. We create monsters to embody what we fear. We craft goddesses of power to acknowledge the strength that exists beyond our control. And then we fear what we invented. Hecate, in her 1,000 names and infinite forms, is perhaps most powerful as a mirror. She reflects back to us the truth we most want to deny, that we stand always at crossroads, that every choice divides us into the version of ourselves that chose and the infinite versions of ourselves that did not. That death is not the opposite of life but its truest threshold. That the boundaries between rational and irrational, between light and shadow, between self and other, are far more permeable than we pretend. The goddess of thresholds is, ultimately, the goddess of transformation. She marks the moment when change becomes inevitable, when one state of being must give way to another. We honor her in silence because to speak her name aloud would be to admit that we are always already transformed, that we are never quite who we were, never quite who we will become, that we exist in an eternal in-between, just as she does. In worshipping her shadow, we acknowledge the shadow in ourselves. I am buried, and I am awake. They thought to keep me silent by fragmenting my name into 1,000 pieces, scattering each epithet across centuries until no one could gather them whole again. But they did not understand. Fragmentation is not diminishment for a goddess of thresholds. It is multiplication. Every name is a path. Every path leads to another name. I am Triaditis at the place where roads converge. I am Enodia on the highway and the hidden doorway. I am Thonia in the chambers beneath, where the earth remembers what the sky has forgotten. I am Phosphoros, yet my light reveals what should remain hidden. I am Kleiduchos, and I hold the keys, not to prisons, but to the spaces between moments. I am Sotyra when I save, and Brimo when I must destroy. I am Milanoe in the dreams of those who call me, and Nyctipelos in the wandering of the lost. I am Skylocagetus, and my hounds know the paths that no human map contains. I have been erased from the daylit hymns, and this is my greatest power. Those who truly need me know how to find me. Those who call me in darkness find that I was always there, waiting in the threshold, with torch held high and key turning in the lock. I am not gone. I have never been gone. And those who listen will hear me calling back. The myth does not die, it transforms. The stories that the ancients told about Hecate echo forward through history, taking new forms, adopting new names, responding to new needs. She appears in the folklore of 1,000 cultures, always at the boundaries, always marking the threshold, always asking the question, will you cross? In the medieval witch trials, she was invoked, sometimes deliberately, sometimes unknowingly, by those accused of speaking with powers beyond the ordained hierarchy. She walked beside healers and midwives, women who tended to the most profound thresholds of human experience, birth and death, sickness and health, ignorance and knowledge. She persists in modern witchcraft, where her 1,000 names are whispered anew in different languages, for different purposes, but always with the same underlying recognition, that some powers answer only to those who understand that power itself dwells in the in-between. Maybe you have already met her, in a dream you forgot upon waking, in a moment of choice where you seem to know the right path without conscious deliberation, in the face of a stranger who recognized something in you that you could not name, in the instant before you made a decision that changed everything. The myth lives in us. It moves through us. We are the paths along which Hecate walks. We are the crossroads where her 1,000 names converge and diverge eternally. The ancient story is not ancient at all. It is happening now, in this very moment, in the threshold between listening and speaking, in the boundary between the person you were before you heard her names and whatever you are becoming. An image remains, not of her form, but of her absence. The way light dies around her, the way sound seems to hesitate before approaching, the way silence, in her presence, becomes a kind of language, a communication that requires no words, no names, no utterances of any kind. In the very last shrine that still honored her, in a hidden place where the devotion has never been fully interrupted, a torch is lit each night and allowed to burn until it consumes itself entirely. In the moment of its extinction, there is a pause, a breath held, a recognition, and then, nothing, but not the nothing of emptiness. The nothing of fullness so complete that it cannot be contained in language. You can forget a name. You can dismiss a myth as superstition or poetry or the desperate imaginings of a past we have outgrown. You can rationalize away every encounter with the threshold, every moment when choice seemed to make itself, every instant when you felt watched by something ancient and understanding. But you cannot forget the shadow. It remains. It persists. It marks you as surely as if you had been stamped with an invisible sigil. You carry her signature in every threshold you cross, in every choice you make, knowing that unchosen alternatives bleed somewhere just beyond perception, in every moment when you recognize that you do not fully control your own life, that you are moved by forces older and deeper than individual will. But this story does not end. The 1,000 names of Hecate are not the whole of what dwells in shadow. She is but one threshold, one boundary keeper, one voice speaking in the dark. Beyond her, beyond even the oldest gods and the deepest thresholds, there waits another dwelling, a place of horror and hunger that even Hecate tends with caution. A god who consumes what should never be consumed, who devours not bodies but memories, who feasts on the very continuity of self, leaving his victims alive but unmade, present but absent, inhabiting a perpetual hunger that can never be satisfied. Next, we descend into the house of the god who eats memories, where to forget is not relief but annihilation, where every feast is both offering and curse, where the only escape is deeper forgetting, and in the darkness of that house, new names await, new thresholds, new whispered questions too terrible to voice aloud. If her name still moves through you like cold breath on winter skin, if you find yourself thinking of crossroads and torches and the spaces between moments, if you have recognized something of yourself in the 1,000 names, if you too stand at a boundary between what was and what might be, then you know what you must do. You must listen. You must remember. You must carry these names forward into the world, even if you can only speak them in the dark, only to yourself, only in the moments when the world forgets to watch. Subscribe. Follow these words deeper, because they are already trying to erase this too, already working to fragment these stories, to scatter these names, to make it impossible for the seeker to find the whole. But the whole is already inside you. You have heard the 1,000 names. You are marked. You will not forget, though you may try. She will remain with you, at the crossroads of your choices, at the thresholds of transformation, at the boundaries between one state of being and another. She will walk beside you, torches held high, revealing what should remain hidden, guiding you toward the paths you must take, the decisions you must make, the unchosen futures you must leave behind. Listen, remember, and in remembering, become.